Goodfellas is an absolute classic. A gangster epic detailing the heyday of the American mob and a cautionary tale of excess and betrayal. A heady cocktail of greed, hubris and extreme violence. It also contains some of the finest American vehicles ever put to film. Note that I'm only including cars that can be attributed to an owner or that appear fully, rather than simply making a background appearance. There are some very cool cars in this film which only appear fleetingly. To these I will give an honourable mention. So, without further ceremony, let us examine and rank the cars of Goodfellas.
But in my heart I
This rather wonderful 1966 Chrysler Newport Convertible is the first car that we see the adult Henry Hill driving in the second act of the film, when he first meets and starts dating Karen. Therefore, he's probably making a statement with it. He's a young gangster with things to prove, so opts for a brightly coloured convertible. Speaking of the colour, I'm not usually against yellow at all, but I don't know what possessed him to select this particularly insipid, nausea-inducing shade. It is simply not nice. It can't seem to decide if it wants to be a yellow or a green. In any case, despite the colour, the styling on these Newports is wonderful. With those pronounced contoured lines on the bodywork, it manages to look quite sleek despite effectively being a large rectangular box. I'm a big fan of the pronounced bumper wings and the recessing of the headlights and grille. The white wall tyres really complete the look. I think it's fair to assume that the flashy Henry would opt for the top of the line model, fitted with a 7.2 litre V8, which, owing to its 4-barrel carburettor, dual exhausts and dual snorkel air cleaner, produce a staggering 365 horsepower. The fact that it's a convertible makes it all the more eye-catching. The most memorable scene involving this vehicle is certainly the one in which Henry drops Karen off at home before promptly pistol-whipping her creep neighbour Bruce into a bloody pulp in front of his ineffectual friends. A lovely car, seriously let down by its weird flaxen paint job. 7.2 panicked phone calls out of 10. Bruce, Karen's neighbour and presumed one-time friend, owns quite a marvellous piece of engineering. A very beautiful 1966 Chevrolet Corvette Stingray, second generation, or C2. In 1966 the base model cost $4,084. Adjusted for inflation, that's $39,743.50 today. Not bad at all for one of the most iconic sports cars ever produced. Born from the 1957 Q Corvette and Bill Mitchell's Stingray Racer, the Corvette Stingray is exceptionally elegant, a word you wouldn't customarily use to describe American vehicles. Or anything American for that matter. Testing at Caltech's wind tunnel moulded those iconic curves, creating the aerodynamic fastback body, long low bonnet and hidden headlights that rotated closed to blend with the sharp air-splitting front end of the car. The designers at GM really knocked it out of the park with this one. Although the split rear window was short-lived, it's just so cool. Very space-age, 60s futurist in its style. The second generation Stingray was lighter than the first, and all 1966 models were equipped with a 5.4 litre V8, producing 250 horsepower as standard. The performance package ramped that up all the way to 360 brake horsepower. It's just a shame that the Stingray is owned by such a scummy character, although I suppose that's not saying much, considering most of the characters in Goodfellas are guilty of a litany of crimes, and the majority are at least complicit, if not active participants, in several murders. A timeless American classic, as distinctive as it is desirable. 9.4 pistol whips out of 10. Henry Hill's Pontiac Grand Prix is famous for being the vehicle in which he, Jimmy Conway and Tommy DeVito transport the fatally wounded Billy Batts. To be exact, Batts is being stored in the boot of the vehicle, where he is subsequently finished off by Tommy using a knife purloined from his mother's kitchen. The 1968 version, which Henry owns, got a pronounced beak-nose grille.
No, it's a natural canopy.
With concealed headlights and a new rear bumper. Despite Pontiac producing convertible versions in earlier years, this ended in 1968, meaning Henry had no choice but to pick the coupe version. 1968 was a big year for federal emission standards too, with new rules introduced aimed at reducing hydrocarbon and carbon monoxide levels produced by road vehicles. This had a knock-on effect for the Grand Prix, as the previous standard 6.6-litre V8 producing 350 horsepower was revised up to a 7-litre V8, cranking out 375 horsepower for the base model and 390 horsepower for the performance spec. Seems strange that emission controls would lead to an increase in horsepower, but then we must remember that it is all to do with making the engines more efficient. Low emissions are achieved when peak combustion efficiency is achieved, which in turn increases power output and lowers fuel consumption. This is all a fancy way of saying that despite being dreadfully nice, the Grand Prix only achieved about 10 miles to the gallon. Then again, this was 1968 and fuel was rather a lot cheaper. An exceptionally cool vehicle, 8.6 shine boxes out of 10.
Frosty the Snowman was a happy, jolly soul. With the
Poor old Johnny Roastbeef. All he wanted to do was enjoy some of his anticipated ill-gotten gains from the Lufthansa heist and purchase a nice shiny new car for his wife. Unfortunately for Johnny, Jimmy Conway is ultra paranoid about getting caught. And not without reason. Lufthansa heist was the biggest in American history, netting its participants an estimated $5.875 million. Even so, it is kind of hard to feel sorry for Johnny when his orders were not to spend any money, and he immediately went out and purchased a brand new bright pink 1979 Cadillac Coupe DeVille. Certainly not the most inconspicuous vehicle, or one of the most wanted men in America to be driving around in. I suppose the Cadillac is perfect for Johnny. It's unabashedly boxy, it's loud, it's brash, it's excessive. Ideal for a low-ranking mobster like Roastbeef, who seems to essentially be a glorified stick-up man, and would want to no doubt project an image of importance to his contemporaries. Again, maybe it's just because I'm not American, and unaccustomed to seeing cars like this, but I love the styling. Roastbeef doesn't get to enjoy his new car for very long at all, as the vehicle effectively gets him killed. Despite it being in his mother's name, Johnny and his blonde wife are found dead in the bright pink Caddy when Jimmy starts swinging his axe not long after the heist. Note the receipt pasted to the window of the vehicle too. Ostentatious, conspicuous, hilarious. 7.7
What's the matter with you?
out of 10. Cars sold today are more monochrome than ever. Just 20 years ago, in 2004, 60.3% of all cars sold were monochrome. Today that figure is 80%. When did we get so boring? Even more distressing is this stat. Brown and beige now account for only 0.9% of cars sold. A travesty if you ask me. Perhaps more people would opt for brown if they knew about Henry Hill's 1979 Cadillac Custom Phaeton Coupe. Surely one of the coolest brown cars you will ever see. To be precise, this special edition Cadillac Coupe DeVille, one of a number of signature editions produced by Cadillac, is painted a shade called Western Saddle Fire Mist and equipped with an antique saddle interior and dark brown cloth top. Truly a symphony of beige. I do rather like this Phaeton Coupe, but it is pretty much just a Coupe DeVille at the end of the day, one which cost an additional $2,029. I love the 1970s brown, but really I think the outrageous pink and white of Johnny Roastbeef's Caddy pips it. Maybe that's just because of the context of the film, gangsters living to excess and all that. Anyway, the Phaeton Coupe features prominently in the final act of the film, in a particularly anxiety-inducing sequence in which Henry Hill is speeding about on a coke-fueled crime-errand spree, trying to sell guns to Jimmy Conway, buying coke from his Pittsburgh connections, and trying to cook a Sunday gravy, all whilst being trailed by DEA helicopters. After nearly getting into a crash, he runs into Clay Davis of HBO's The Wire, working as a doctor at the same hospital he's picking up his kid brother from. One of the most magnificent brown cars you will ever see. 7.2 helicopters out of 10. The final car on this list is also the only non-domestic vehicle in Goodfellas, Karen Hill's Volvo GL244. If I had £1, or $1.30, for every time I've covered a Swedish-made car which is owned and driven by a character played by Lorraine Bracco, I would have £2, or $2.60. Which is not much, but it's just weird that it happened twice, especially since I've only made 2 videos. What's also weird is that this scene is set in 1980, and this appears to be a 1981 model, technically a blooper. Compared to the other cars on this list, the Volvo is rather minuscule, not only in terms of its engine size, but also with regards to its engine power. The 2.1 litre B21 red block engine producing a paltry 107 brake horsepower. Despite this, the car is evidently powerful enough to carry Karen and the family about in. The 240 series was extremely popular worldwide, pretty much becoming a legend in its own production run lifetime, from 1974 to 1994. The styling is classic Volvo, boxy, understated, somewhat Spartan. Reliability was excellent. The 240 even enjoyed a successful stint in the European Touring Car Championship, in the form of a 240 with an enlarged turbocharger. To satisfy the FIA's production requirements, 500 of these turbocharged versions were produced. A chic classic, 6.5 fur coats out of 10.
To get ready for love.
Tommy appears to drive 2 Chevy Impalas in Goodfellas. The first is an anachronistic 1965 model, being lent on by Tommy and Henry in a 1963 scene in which they are hanging out at the airport, waiting to rob hapless truckers of their cargo. The other is a beautiful cream-coloured convertible model, which Tommy uses to give Karen a lift as she hunts down Henry for standing her up at their double dinner date. Another American icon, the Chevrolet Impala has been coveted by countless pop culture figures, including, of course, Eazy-E of NWA fame. This Buick LeSabre, driven by some older mafioso who whacked Tommy, appears to be quite an appropriate transport. It's rather dignified without being so ostentatious that it would draw attention from the feds. I always found the way that the rear bumper only just clears the pavement in this scene extremely satisfying. Anyway, Jimmy addresses a Vinny on the phone when he calls up to find out if Tommy has been made yet. Maybe this Vinny owns the car? Who knows? It was amongst the Italians anyway. Real greaseball shit. The oldest car on this list by a long way, and a proper old school gangster wagon, the Cadillac Fleetwood 60 Special is a real beauty, a testament to American post-war engineering, and the kind of vehicle you'd expect to see Don Corleone being ferried about in Godfather 1. In 1948, the 60 Special had undergone a redesign, which saw those wonderful teardrop-shaped pontoon fenders added to the wheel arches, and the addition of the chrome bumper bullets which would become a hallmark of Cadillac styling for years to come. And with that, our review of the cars of Goodfellas is complete. Now for the ranking. In last place comes Karen with her trusty Volvo 244. The 5th spot is occupied by Henry's custom Cadillac Phaeton Coupe. In 4th we have Henry's sickly yellow Chrysler Newport Convertible. Next comes Johnny Roastbeef with his hot pink Cadillac in 3rd place. Henry's outrageous Pontiac Grand Prix takes 2nd. And finally, coming in 1st we have Bruce's 1966 Chevrolet Corvette Stingray. Was it ever in doubt? I hope you have enjoyed watching. Please let me know what mistakes I've made in the comments. I have more videos on the way, including one for season 2 of The Sopranos. And remember, never rat on your friends and always keep your mouth shut.
Now I gotta turn my back.